Hi, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Great. Looks like everyone is joining okay. Well, thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. Hello and welcome to the second ABLE learning session that we're hosting this year. These are obviously hosted in partnership with Colorado Post and the ABLE Colorado team, two members we have for our panelists today. We're so happy to have you all here, and we're very excited and to have members of our hardworking Colorado team here to help us put together this event. So I think we'll just start off with a couple introductions, and then we can kind of dive right into the meat of all this. So my name is Declan Sullivan. I'm a senior program associate with the ABLE national team here at Georgetown University Law Center. And in my role, I support various statewide initiatives, and I have the pleasure of working with the ABLE Colorado team to introduce our program to a variety of agencies across the state. I'll have Elisa, our statewide coordinator, tell us a little bit more about that in a minute. But before we get started, I'd love to take a moment to introduce our two panelists that we have. So first, I'll start off with Elisa DeTrolio from the Denver Police Department, who's serving as our statewide coordinator, as I mentioned, for the ABLE Colorado Initiative. Elisa currently works as a program manager in the Chief's Office of the Denver Police Department, focusing on operational innovation and performance. She has served over 20 years in the public safety field, strengthening government programs through research and evaluation, program management, change management, and capacity building. And Elisa previously worked for the Colorado Department of Corrections for 8 years, where she developed an investigative analysis unit within the parole division, participated in numerous multi-agency investigations, and was nationally recognized for developing an innovative offender management technology program. She's been with the city and the county of Denver for 8 years, managing various programs, process improvement initiatives, and performance measurement frameworks. Elisa is currently a consultant with the Institute for Intergovernmental Research, supporting performance measurement and capacity building for federal grantees around the country. And she has a Master's of Science in Criminal Justice from Northeastern University, a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology from Boston University, and is a certified change practitioner. Chris Fusetti, who also joins us today, is a 28-year veteran of law enforcement from Northern Colorado. Beginning his career in 1995, he served in a variety of special assignments, including FTO, SWAT, gang unit, bicycle unit, and school resource officer, firearms instructor, and traffic. Chris was promoted to sergeant in October of 2006 and served as a supervisor for the field training officer program. In August of 2008, he was a supervisor to the 250-member police unit for delegate security for the Democratic National Convention. In 2015, Chris was assigned to supervise the Major Crimes Investigation Unit. He was also a coordinator for the 17th Judicial District Critical Incident Team, who investigates officer-involved shootings. Chris was promoted to commander in 2019 and is a graduate of Northwestern School of Police Staffing and Command Class number 466. He currently oversees recruiting, hiring, and training for over 300 members at the Thornton Police Department. Chris has been active in the deployment of OIS training and ABLE implementation and speaks nationally on the subjects to law enforcement audiences. So we are very lucky to have both of them. They have a tremendous amount of experience in this space and can speak to a lot of the challenges that a lot of our instructors might see when rolling out this program, both on the programmatic side and also on the instructional side. So before we kind of dive into the substance of the panel, I'd love to turn it over to Elisa, who can just kind of share a little bit about what ABLE Colorado is hoping to accomplish, and also how any interested officers or agencies can kind of get involved. Elisa, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks so much, Declan. Thank you all so much for joining us today. I'll be brief. I just wanted to make any of you aware who have not heard that we have started a statewide initiative to really recruit, not just recruit, I mean, that's certainly our goal, but to provide support and resources, no matter how small your agency is, no matter where you're located in the state, we want to really make sure that regardless of lack of manpower, resources, awareness of ABLE, we're here to help make sure that you have the same access to this program that really does work, that really does save careers, save lives, promote officer health and wellness, and let's do it consistently. Whether, in the spirit of ABLE, where looking out for one another is so critical, is really the framework of this entire program. Like, we don't need to just make sure we're doing that within our own siloed departments. Let's do this for one another statewide. We all have the same mission. And of course, whether we are, in a rural agency where multiple departments might respond to an incident, or whether it's a mutual aid situation for a major protest, we need to be consistent in how we are making sure that one another are safe and falling within specific policies and practices. So we need to then make sure that every department has the access to the same tools and tactics to learn how to do this. And that's really what this initiative is all about. It started out pretty informally with some of us that had been active and able and seeing successes within our own departments, and then Post, under the Attorney General's office, decided they really wanted to support this initiative and provided a significant amount of funding. CIRSA, who is the insurance provider for many of you on this call, also stepped up and provided a significant amount of funding to ensure that we could bring training to you, to your area, no matter where across the state, and really making it accessible and easier for you all to really be part of this wonderful program. What I'm here for, and Chris and a few of us that are more central parts of this initiative, we're here to really help with any your application support, implementation, training, whether it's getting this off the ground in your agency, or things like today, even if you just have a simple question, or you have something to offer another department. We've all been through it. We've all made the mistakes already. We've all had the bumps and managed the resistance and seen the successes in our own agencies. And not just leaning on us, but we want to really seek out those talented trainers and program coordinators and really change agents in your departments to join us and become part of this initiative. So really that's what it's about. And if I haven't talked to you already, I'll probably be reaching out to you or someone in your department. I'll drop my email in the chat if you want to reach out to me and either learn about becoming a statewide instructor, or if you just if you haven't applied yet, how I can help you get that started. And really just be of assistance to you, or if you're interested in joining our consortium, we'd love to have you. So thank you again for allowing us to take up an hour of your time today.
Thanks, Lisa. So if anyone would like any more information, you can email the initiative at the email I just dropped in the chat. And then we also have some information about it on our website, the ABLE website, under agencies and initiatives. You can also, of course, always reach out to the national team if you want any more information. So let's get going. The session title, Responding to Pushback, that's kind of the theme of today. I have a couple questions for our two panelists, but we of course want to also make sure that at the end here we have a sufficient time to hear from you all if you have any questions for our folks. But just to kind of kick us off, I suppose, one of the first questions that comes to my mind when we're talking about ABLE implementation and we're talking about rollout is, how do you define success? So in other words, what are we hoping to achieve with ABLE? And that would be both in the classroom and then with the program overall. Elisa and Chris.
So I would say, achieving success in the classroom is you want the majority of your students to understand the human aspect of this and not so much the cop aspect. And what I mean by that is a lot of the science that we talk about in the class has nothing to do with police officers. It has to do with us as human beings. So getting them to understand the science of other groups have gone through this and they've put ABLE implementation in when we start talking about pilots and we start talking about emergency rooms and the other professions that are dealing with intervention, we're not the first that has had to deal with this. So getting them to understand the overall picture of that, and really between the classroom and success in your police department, we're looking at a culture that we want to build or change. So how do you start in the classroom with them understanding the human behavior surrounding intervention? Not only intervening, but just as important, accepting intervention. And I would say accepting intervention is, if not more important than being able to intervene. And we've all seen examples of either on YouTube or other videos out there of officers that have been intervened on and weren't ready to accept that intervention, i.e. The sergeant in Florida that turned around and choked his officer because he wasn't ready or didn't have the training to know how to accept that intervention. That's just as important as intervening. And so getting everybody in the classroom to the point where they understand that it's not just the big events that we're trying to intervene on. It's, hey, when you're walking down the hallway and somebody's making some remarks that they probably shouldn't be making, are we stepping up and saying something as minimal as, hey, should we really be having this conversation in the hallway right now? And having a culture of professionalism inside of the walls of your police department, because what happens inside the walls of your police department translates to what's happening out there on the street. So if there are certain behaviors or things being allowed to happen within those walls, that translates out onto the street. And we see that across the country in agencies that, they show up on the news. That's not a one-off normally. Normally there is a culture or some other things that have happened with that agency that led to these events. So we want to begin in the classroom with changing the culture. And one of the first ways that you can do that as the instructor is confront the elephant in the room and bring it up. Hey, how many of you heard that this is tattletale training? And you're going to get some hands raised, and then ask them, well, tell me about it. What have you heard? And they're going to bring up that this is just another way to report people to IA. And most of those answers you're going to get, you should be expecting to have. And then when you talk about that, explain to them, our hope and able is that we are intervening on things that never reach that level. But let them vent all those things out and then talk a little bit about it. And then hopefully by the end of the day, and this is what I throw out there, hopefully by the end of the day, through this training, we've changed a few of your perceptions or preconceived notions. And I would say 99% of the time, a large amount of those people that are pushbacking initial as far as tattletale training don't feel that way anymore. Go ahead.
I think also, obviously, yeah, our goal is from the classroom to everyday practice. Another, I think, overlooked success is when it starts to become ingrained in all of your other trainings, which is a standard, a requirement if you're going to be part of the ABLE program. But I actually had a perfect timing. There was a meeting in a conference room outside my office, so I could hear about crowd control training, updating their crowd control training for Denver. And I will credit, if Sergeant Knudsen is on this call, I think he is, I know that it was him that got this moving forward. I sort of, half working, half listening to what was going on. And I all of a sudden heard someone say, matter of factly, okay, where do we want to put the ABLE stuff? Where do we want to put the de-escalation and the intervention piece? And it wasn't, okay, we've got to do this, or let's just appease people. It was a matter of fact. And these were our Metro SWAT guys, our Academy folks, our special ops folks that were really just, yeah, this is going to be part of our everyday. And the more that it becomes ingrained in not just your culture, I mean, this is how it becomes ingrained in your culture, part of the training consistently that you provide, whether it's use of force, whether it's driving, whether it's, your EEOC training, just your use of force, everything really just, it all works together. And I think once your department figures that out and figures out how to do that, it just becomes seamless.
That's great. Thank you so much, both, for sharing some of that. And and I think, Chris, you spoke a little bit to this already. So I'm going to kind of combine two questions here, but I'm curious to hear a little bit more about some of those common misconceptions you hear about ABLE. And then I guess, this is kind of a question, again, both on the programming side, but then also on the instructional side. How do you frame ABLE training and frame the broader program before folks even step into the classroom to kind of combat some of those misconceptions? What are some of the things that you've learned from your implementation? Some lessons learned, I guess.
Messaging up front before it gets started. I think we've all experienced big, whether it's training, a new policy, anything that gets rolled out and not communicated throughout, whether it's down, up, even with, consider your community, how they're going to hear about these things too. That's where rumors start. That's where people form their own opinions. And that's where you get the resistance. So I would absolutely suggest, whether it's heading to some roll calls to talk about, I think Pueblo has done a really good job on this as well. We pushed it out in patrol vehicles, so they see a little blurb about what ABLE is, what ABLE isn't, or, little snippets from the curriculum when they turn on the computers in their vehicles. And obviously having your leadership not just speak to it, but speak to it often. And really speak to it and how they lead the department.
Yeah, I think you have to make sure that this is a culture from the top down. So as instructors, you need to be able to go into those classes and either have your chief, deputy chiefs, those leadership people sitting in those classes. And I know for our agency, that's what we did. For our agency, ABLE training was from the chief down, and it included all sworn and non-sworn members, because you have areas in your communication center where intervention could be happening. You have areas in your records department where somebody might need to intervene before somebody releases a report that maybe they missed a redaction on. Those little things that we're talking about, intervening, trying to take care of each other. And it goes back to, I really like to talk about the little things, because the little things are what turn into the big things. It's easy for us to say, hey, if you see somebody with a knee on somebody's neck, you need to intervene. I think we all get that, and we all understand that. It's the small things, the day-to-day things, where when you see the officer pat somebody down and they put the person's cell phone on their light bar and they go to walk away and they forget about it, and there's 5 officers standing there watching this happen, who's stepping in and saying, hey, you left the cell phone on the light bar, and we probably shouldn't be putting things on cars because that's how we drive away and break stuff. And now we're paying thousands of dollars for cell phones because of this, right? So it's those little things that turn into big things over time. So talking about that up front, we all know from whatever state you're in on this call, I'm sure that you have examples from YouTube or whatever that you can put up and say, here's something that went really bad that we should ask ourselves, why didn't anybody intervene? We saw this coming. These officers were going down this bad path and nobody stepped up. Why did that happen? And then talk about, well, we think we know some of the reasons why something like that could happen, and we want to provide training to everybody so you recognize those situations and can keep it from happening. So we have better outcomes for everyone involved, not just us as officers, but suspects, victims, community members, witnesses. We want the best outcome for everybody involved, not just for us.
And also when you're reading through the ABLE standards and suggestions on how to implement this, when they talk about your program champions, your program ambassadors, take that seriously. And it might sound daunting, and what does this even mean? But those are the folks that have the credibility in your department to really sell this program. So it could be your police union. We sat down with a couple representatives of our union and asked them to endorse it. And they gave us some feedback on how they thought we could roll this out successfully, and we incorporated that. And people will listen to what the union is suggesting. Also, who in your department has the credibility. who you would follow them into any situation. They are great leaders, whether they're perfect officers or not. They have the experience, they've made the mistakes, they've come back for it, they are supportive of one another. Get them on board and they can help you sell this program before it gets started, use them as instructors if you can, and have them continue to message and really champion this program for you.
Yeah, it's great. Thank you. And Chris, I don't remember if it's you who told me this story about the cell phones, but that is one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Could you share that with the audience? I think that's a really, it's like a funny anecdote that I think is amusing, but it also illustrates, to your point, the way that making it a part of everyday culture can really have these kind of unintended consequences, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those small things again, where, prior to the ABLE training, I was getting calls from our risk manager in the city, letting me know that we paid out about $10,000 in cell phone loss because officers were leaving cell phones and other property on their police cars and driving away, and they were either lost forever or ran over and damaged. Or so when that was brought to my attention, we were, I would say, probably the first few weeks into ABLE training our agency. So I went to the IA commander and I said, when you look at the calls for service that those cell phones were lost on, are you able to tell me how many of those calls there were 2 or more officers on and were part of during the search of the suspect? Almost all of them, 99% of them, had 2 or more officers on scene when those things were placed on a vehicle and left there. I use this example in our ABLE training. Since our agency has gone through ABLE training over the last year and a half, we've had 1 cell phone that has been reported lost, and it wasn't because it was left on a car, it was a different situation. So because they recognized when there are 5 people standing around and they're all watching something happen, unless somebody steps up and says, hey, we can't do this, there might be, and we talk about it in class, right? As a group, as instructors, what am I talking about? I don't want to give the answer because I think you guys need to know this. But I'll just say it. When we talk about, pluralistic ignorance, right? Well, nobody else seems to think there's a problem, so there's not a problem. Well, there is a problem leaving property on a car like that, right? So how are we teaching our officers to step in and say, not only should I take this off the car and help this person out, but I should probably let everybody know we're not following our training in how we handle property, and it should not go on a car. I will tell you this, first line supervisors in your agencies are the most important part of being able to create a culture in your department. They are the ones on the front lines with the officers that are making decisions. They're watching these things happen, and they can make or break your culture. So I would really spend time with your first line supervisors talking about, especially if you're the watch commander, talking about what things are they seeing out there that we should be or should not be, intervening on, and getting those first line supervisors involved. Because if they're not intervening in the small things, then that's how these subcultures are created, right? We might not have a culture in the police department of this, but maybe this one graveyard shift has a culture of whatever that is. Well, what are we doing with the first line supervisors to make sure that they are reinforcing the training? And being I have the luxury of being, in charge of our training. We can train the officers on how they need to act and what they need to do, right? Task wise, behavior wise, how we train them to talk to people. Well, when they leave us and they go into field training, the field training officers are teaching them, they're training them how to act, how to talk to people, everything they're supposed to do. Well, where does that get lost when they leave field training and 5 years from now, they're rude, they're doing all these other behaviors? It's because your first line supervisors didn't take the time or weren't involved in reinforcing the training that these officers received. So first line supervision, as far as ABLE, one of the most important keys to this is making sure your first line supervisors are feeling that they are supported, that if they have to intervene, that they are supported, but more on what are they doing with their group of officers to make sure that the training in the police department is being reinforced. Because we all see examples in our own states of things that you watch officers do and you go, how could that happen? But then you trace it back, and you can trace it back to those things. So
Yeah, it's a great point, Chris, definitely about the first line supervision too. It's something I know that on the national team we think about a lot is how can we support our agencies engage those folks a little bit more. So one kind of last question from me, and then I'd love to turn it over to the audience to see if there's any audience questions. But I'm curious to hear a little bit, as an instructor, what are some of the most common sources of pushback that you get from students in the classroom itself? And then, how do you actually respond to those sources of pushback?
I would say one of the most common comments that I have from students in the class are they bring up, was the department going to support this? And I try and turn it back on the class and say, well, you are the department. Now, if they're talking about command staff, we can talk about as instructors. Yes, this is being supported from the chief on down. The chief, everybody is attending this training. The chief might even be in there, he may not, but everybody from the chief on down is attending this training. So it is supported by the police department. But if they're just making that general statement of, well, is the department going to support us? Well, you are the department. So I hope that you are going to support this because you're the people that make up the agency. So I've had those kind of questions come up.
I think just to that particular point too, if I've seen it handled where the pushback in that particular, we don't believe our command staff or our chiefs would support this. And if you're consistently getting that pushback, just be honest and say, does it, even if you agree or don't agree, what matters is that you are looking out for one another. What is it going to help you if you are out there in a situation and to be thinking, well, I don't think my chief cares about Able or not. You owe it to your partner out there that you're with to keep him or her safe, or to make sure that they don't walk into a situation that's going to land them in IA or get themselves hurt, or if they're having personal struggles. At that particular moment, it doesn't matter whether your command staff supports Able or not.
A couple other things that I've experienced is we had a husband and wife officers that worked here. The husband had some performance things happen at work, and just a lot of performance issues, and eventually had to leave the job, was abusing some alcohol and some other things. So there was some intervention that occurred with him with supervision. It just he elected not to change those behaviors. So, but in Able, the spouse of that person really felt that the agency let them down. And she brought that up in a classroom with 50 people sitting in a classroom. And that's when she picked to air those grievances. So if you have something like that happen where somebody is really personalizing, because you will get, this is great, but the agency really failed me or somebody else, right, in the past. Let them vent it out. Give them a couple of minutes and let them vent it out. If they're really going down a rabbit hole, you need to bring that to an end at some point, but I would let them vent that out. And then depending on how big of a disruption that caused, I would immediately go to a break. So if that person took up about 5 minutes of their rants, acknowledge that you're not going to solve it as an instructor. So don't sit there and try and solve or answer their questions. Acknowledge their feelings and then go into a 5-minute break. So, hey, you know what? Thank you for sharing that with everybody. It must be really difficult, what you're going through. you know what, class, let's take 5 minutes and let's come back and then we'll get back into the material. And that gives everybody to have that 5 minutes of side talk, and then come back and then refocus the whole group into the lesson or where you're at in the presentation. So that's one thing I've experienced.
And I think to your point too, Chris, is, but make sure that if you're really seeing somebody, whether they're, they feel that they've been failed, or you're starting to pick up that they really are struggling with something, whether they're open about it or not. Make sure though that you don't, you do follow up, whether it's reaching out to a member of your peer support team, or you personally following up after the training, to make sure that that person that we're just not like, well, sorry, it seems like you're going through a tough time. After this training, I'm washing my hands of it. They need to know that you as an instructor represent wellness in that moment. So you're going to do your due diligence to whether if follow up personally or reach out to that officer's maybe partner or good friend, that they trust, or member of your wellness team, to really just provide that follow-up post training and make sure that they know that they're supported.
That's great. Thanks for sharing some of that. Well, so those are all of my I have many questions on this topic, so I'm happy to go all day, but I don't want to take up all the space. I would love to hear from some of our audience members about the challenges that maybe you're experiencing in the classroom or facilitating and rolling out this program. So feel free to kind of raise your hand or come off mute, or of course, if you feel comfortable, you can put your questions in the chat and I'm happy to read them out.
We can continue to talk about examples of resistance we've seen, but we definitely would love to hear what everybody else has experienced.
Yeah.
I think what else have you come across?
You know what? I've gone into some classes where I felt like there was going to be a high level of resistance. For example, one of the classes I did, everybody in the class was either in the drop program, assigned to areas where the agency might be trying to keep them out of trouble. So they put them, so I've had some classes where going into it, I was anticipating a lot of pushback and a lot of problems. Fortunately, the curriculum is set up in such a way that you're talking about human behavior. So we're not coming after the cop aspect of this in the first part of the program. So the curriculum is set up with that human behavior side to it, that it's been my experience anyway. It's taken the wind out of a lot of those people's sails, because they realize, well, it's just not cops. It's every human is subject to having, groupthink, pluralistic ignorance. It's not just us, it's everybody, because we give those examples in class, right? So I think the curriculum really has done a good job about not having a lot of pushback to begin these classes with. So yes, I've had pushback. I've had, those weird things happen in classes, but I would say for the most part, the curriculum is set up really well that, and maybe somebody from the class can give me a different example if they have, but I would hope as instructors, you guys aren't, every class that you're going into, you're not having a ton of pushback. If you are, I'd like to hear about it and let's talk about it, see if there's something that we might be able to offer in that situation.
I think war stories too. You will certainly see one or two folks that want to talk about somebody who did something 10 years ago, and what a cluster that was. And that can definitely spur people into then offering additional stories. And I think, I think you spoke to that of getting everybody back on track. Something as instructors, it's very tempting to do too, to tell your own war stories, to make sure to be mindful of.
Yeah, and I would say as an instructor too, it's just the adage of, don't be the PowerPoint by death instructor, right? You need to know the material well enough that you're not standing up there and reading off the slide. I I've been in classes where we have a good energy in the room. There's a lot of questions being asked. People are really giving a lot of input. And then we change instructors and they start just standing up there in a monotone voice, reading off the slide, and the energy in the room just dies. So again, it's practicing those good instructor techniques of know the material well enough that when you put up a slide, not only can you talk about it without looking at the slide, can you give some personal experiences? When you're about to ask the class, hey, I'm going to ask all the tables to talk about a time where you either intervene or failed to intervene and give us an example. Before you throw that exercise out there, it never hurts to say, this is going to be the exercise, but I'd really like to tell you, take a couple minutes and tell you about a time where I failed to intervene. And if you do that as in the instructor and they see that and they're like, well, the instructor is willing to share with us a time that he or she failed to intervene, I'm much more willing to talk about my experience now with them than before. So it's just those little tips and tricks that I want to throw out there to everybody that you just gain through experience and doing the material and being an instructor long enough to know that stuff.
So a couple questions coming in the chat. And again, if you don't want to message it to everyone, feel free to send it to me directly. I'm happy to read them out. So this question we got, I think is really terrific. And Elisa, you were talking earlier about, I think you mentioned a CDU training where an officer was talking about bringing in ABLE principles. And sorry if maybe not everyone uses CDU, the crowd control training I think you were talking about. So this question is basically just asking if you could expand a little bit on how you were able to get other instructors to include ABLE principles and other lesson plans. Chris, maybe if you have any examples of that. And exactly, I think just, how do you actually infuse ABLE in other coursework? Because we talk about it, but it's not something we really expand a lot on in the Train the Trainer, for example. So how has that worked out for you?
So one of the things that we've done through the training unit is we do arrest control training every quarter. So at least for one of those quarters, part of that arrest control training is we will have our trainers pull somebody aside and say, this time when you go to arrest this person, we want you to start escalating the situation and see what your cover officer does. So we hit them cold. And so they start escalating, and then we sit and watch and we see what the cover officer or officers, if they react, if they step in. And if they don't, then we get to a point where we time it out and we ask them about the ABLE principles. Hey, what are you seeing this officer do right now? And they start talking about it. And then all of a sudden the little light goes off and goes, you know what, we should have recognized that and tapped that person out and gave them a break real quick. I would say in most cases, people are stepping up and stepping in and following those principles, but we're testing that through our training on arrest control scenarios and hitting them cold with those things. Same with the supervisors. You're the sergeant on scene. You're going to watch these two officers make this arrest. And for the next hour, they do what they do. And then all of a sudden there's one where as a supervisor, we put you in a situation where you should be intervening. And then we sit back and watch, do you or don't you? And then we hot wash it or, talk about it and say, great job, right? You intervened when you were supposed to. That's exactly what we're looking for. None of this is reportable because it wasn't reportable before. So we really appreciate you doing that. Or, well, you didn't intervene here and you probably should have. Let's talk about it. And why did you feel that you didn't, and then see if that's coming back to any of those principles that we talk about in ABLE. So that's one of the ways that we're reinforcing the ABLE principles is through our training programs and looking at in which situations can we put kind of a cold thing into to where officers, they got to be on their toes, right? They got to be watching, and as a cover officer, that's your responsibility. Not only making sure that this person doesn't get hurt, but making sure that this person acts in a professional and appropriate manner.
And I was really lucky. I didn't have, our academy, Denver's Academy, really embraced ABLE, and came up with a lot of creative ways to implement into the our CEP, our continuing education. One of those also was our sergeant school for all new sergeants. They built a block in about ABLE, and Chris spoke to this, as well as having that frontline supervisor really has to buy in and enforce it. So integrating it into as they're learning about timekeeping and use of force reports and all of that fun stuff, it's also learning how to that this is your responsibility as a new leader so they kind of have that a bit of a refresher on ABLE. And then we send a very seasoned either lieutenant or sergeant, one of our instructors, to really talk to those folks about how to build the principles of ABLE into this new role. We also, I don't know if many of you have ICAP, which is very similar. I cannot even.
Immersion communications, assessment, and tactics.
Thank you so much. We rolled them out together in our department with the refresher, where you will have your 2-hour refresher, and then you do some of the ICAT module, the scenario module, and then we have some of our ABLE instructors, our academy folks, working together to really see how you can build those in your de-escalation scenarios as well.
Thank you. So here's another question we have in the chat from Lindy. So, and I will say, I can back her up on this. We hear this all the time, and so much so, obviously, that we've built it into as a discussion point in the Train the Trainer program. But, one of the most common pieces of pushback we get is, I don't understand why we need to do this. We already do this at our agency, or we already do this in law enforcement. How do you typically respond to those sorts of comments?
Yeah, when we were going through, we had a lot of those comments too, right? We already do this. Well, okay, I'm sure that we have pockets of areas where we do this, and in the history of our department, I'm sure your departments are no different. There are pockets of probably shifts or people where they naturally have that ability to do intervention, and yes, we've done this for a long time. But I also throw it back to them and ask them, so is what you're saying in our department, we don't have any complaints of officers that may have talked to somebody rudely or in an inappropriate manner when another officer was there? Do we not have any complaints of any type of excessive force? Do we not have any employee complaints with HR about workplace harassment or any of those instances? And if anybody in your audience could answer, yeah, we don't have any of that, I would be very surprised. So if you have any of that, then yes, we do practice ABLE or these intervention techniques, and we do a good job. However, because these things are still happening, there's always room for improvement. And we're also practicing these because there are other agencies, maybe next to us or in our same state, that don't. And how are we prepared to intervene on if we're working on a call that borders another agency and now they're doing something they shouldn't be doing? Are we prepared to intervene with them because they're not doing this type of thing? So I would say in all of your agencies, you're going to hear this, and I think you should acknowledge that yes, there are pockets of people in our agency that do very well at this, but there are pockets of people in our agency that could do better. And that's why we're here, is because we want everybody to be to the level of those officers that are already practicing this.
And it gives you an opportunity too to go back to that, what ABLE isn't. You're not receiving this training because as a punishment, because you're all terrible at this, because you've all made these mistakes, because we have no integrity in our department. It's because intervening is hard. It's hard whether it's to the knee on the neck situation, or it's hard if you're hearing some just inappropriate conversation. We're human, And now you as officers get the luxury of having all eyes on you while you try to navigate whether you intervene or not, and when you intervene, and all of the inhibitors that we all experience as, you know, as non-sworn, as civilians in our everyday lives. You get to do that with your body worn on, with cameras recording you, with possible deadly results. So and because other industries like airline, medical, they have struggled with this too, recognizing that how difficult it is. So let's just offer you additional tools to help you do that every day. And I know we often hear a lot of our older vets say, yeah, I mean, we do this, I have been doing this my whole career, it's great, but you know, it's good stuff, and let's make sure that our new guys learn this. Great, absolutely. I'll continue that mission. Thank you.
Yeah, and feel free to put up the slide and talk about, you know what, there's a certain percent of our agency that those members, they were just born to do this. They're born interveners, and they do a great job at it. And then there's a certain percent of our agency that may be on this side over here where they're just not going to do it, and they're not, right? But what we're really talking about is the rest of us. How do the rest of us take this training to where we can be better at intervening? And if I were to ask anybody in the audience and in the classroom, go back 30 days, think back 30 days. And if you think back through the last 30 days, have you seen or heard anybody in your agency say or do something that they probably shouldn't have done? And did you intervene? And if you didn't, that's the reason why we're doing this training. Is maybe you should have, maybe you shouldn't have, but are we giving you the tools to where you feel comfortable in those situations of saying something, doing something, bringing it up? The tools that we give you to make sure that, I think we all are very proud of our organizations, and we all want our organizations to be professional, right? It's about the service that we provide to the community. So again, it's like any other training that we do. We're doing it because this can get lost over time, right? And cultures don't just happen overnight. Cultures are created over time. It's the little things. Those little things create the culture over time. So take a culture check of your agency. Take a culture check. You know, I'll ask them, tell me about the culture at the police department. What do you guys think the culture is? They'll be honest with you, and they'll tell you it could be better, or it's pretty good, but it could be better, or no, it's not good. Okay, well, this is one of the ways that we want to change that culture is, are we looking out for each other? Because I would much rather step in and say, hey, you know what, should we be having this conversation in the hallway where other people can hear us because of what's being said? I probably don't think we should be doing that. Than walking up to IA next week because somebody walking by made a complaint to HR that we were using some language that we probably shouldn't have. And now it's going to cost us a day off or a dock and pay or something like that. So it's about taking care of each other in those situations, and not necessarily, you know, again, it's not tattletale training. And I could go on and on and on. So.
That's great. Thank you, Chris and Elisa. So feel free, audience members, you can continue to send questions. We have a few more minutes left here with our panelists, so feel free to send them to me directly or just pop them in the chat or come off mute, no worries. I guess one kind of question I have is, I'm just kind of thinking about this, just to kind of be a little broad, is, you know, for both of you, is there one thing that you've learned in this process that you didn't know when you started? And is there something that, you know, let's say I'm going out to my agency and I'm about to start teaching my first class, or I'm going to be implementing this program tomorrow. What's the sort of advice that you would give me in terms of preparing to deal with maybe some of this wrestling or cultural challenges that we've talked about today?
Know the material, know the material, know the material. If you don't know the material, you're going to struggle. Any of the questions that we've talked about today, the pushback stuff, I I can always come back to a slide in the presentation and put it up and say, well, this might be what we're talking about, right? Some of us are the 2%, some of us might be over here, and the rest of us are in the middle. So this is why we're doing some of the training. So know the material well enough to where some of those odd things that come up, you should be able to pull a slide up or think about within the training to talk about that. I don't know that I've never been thrown a landmine yet that I wasn't able to either pull up a slide or go back to own experiences in your own departments and talk about it, right? Or go back to the case studies, right? Hey, you know why we're doing this type of training is because in this agency over here, this sergeant probably wished that somebody would have stepped in and helped him fix those handcuffs. And now he's living with another officer's death. And that's one of the reasons why we're doing this training. We do not want any type of tragedy to happen in our police department. And we don't think that it will, but we're just doing everything that we can to reinforce our culture here, to make sure that we never end up in a situation like that. So you can always bring it back to those different things. And that's why you really have to know the material back and forth. So just study the material and watch other instructors instruct. I have another instructor that I instruct with, and we learn so much from each other because we have different styles. So I will pick things from his style and implement them into my presentation and vice versa. So the more instructors that you can observe and steal things from, the better you'll be as an instructor, especially in this topic. And I steal stuff from, Greg and everybody. I'm always stealing their stuff. So and
steal from Chris.
yeah, they've
He's
stole
really
some
good at
stuff
that.
from me too. So, but
A couple landmines that I just thought of, and we're a big department of 1,500 cops, and so we had I think 30 or 40 trainings, I can't remember, but 3 trainings happened after, so I guess any advice I would pay attention to news that police related news, whether it's your own department or others, and I have the luxury of our own. One, we had a training the day after a major an indictment of one of our officers came out, and boy, was that an angry class that day. And I feel like I failed. Yeah, I'm a program coordinator and I'm non-sworn, so I don't do many trainings. So I feel like I failed my poor instructors that day by not, I'm granted they're seasoned, they're wonderful, they handle it, but I should have put 2 and 2 together and reached out and said, let's talk about how you guys want to handle this or be ready for it, because they had a really tough day, 8 hours of tough day. And, could I have gotten one of our chiefs to go down and talk to them too, would have been a good idea. We also had, and this, I feel terrible, this has happened twice to the same instructors. An officer died the day before, one suicide, one, I would call it, lead drinking that led to his death over years. So, and that was a tough class for different reasons. But just if those things, if you're able to be in the know or watch the news, and it doesn't have to be your own department, but maybe something happened in Thornton, which is just a couple towns away, that's gonna affect your class. And that was definitely a learning experience for me, to really reach out to my instructors, help prepare them. If I don't know how, call somebody who does. We also have not just wellness, but for anyone who knows Abigail Tucker, who's a national instructor and a psychologist, and really can come through with helpful hints at the last minute, give her a call. And also just let your instructors know you're there to support, and what can I do to help in that moment.
Yeah, and I would say on that note, if you have a situation where you have an officer suicide within a few days, and you decide to continue putting on the class, don't try and deny what's going on. Talk about officer wellness, and don't be afraid to bring up the fact that, not only in this situation, but there are so many situations out there where we probably know somebody or know somebody that knows somebody that has taken their own life. And in those situations, the survivor guilt that occurs of, man, I should have done this or I could have done that. That's kind of what we're here talking about, is intervention, right? So not just about excessive force or other things. Of when we see officers that are struggling, are we doing everything that we can to intervene in those situations? And we all struggle with those feelings after we know somebody that has taken their own life of, is there something that I could have done to stop this from happening? And you have to work through those feelings, and don't be afraid to let your class know of there's that survivor guilt, right? So one of the ways for us to try and work through this is, let's talk about it. And then moving forward, what are some of the signs that we can recognize in anybody that might be struggling that we could step in and offer some help to? Are they showing up to work late? What do you guys see? What do you think are some initial signs that somebody could show that they're struggling? And let them start answering and let them start talking about those things. So it's just one suggestion, that if you are going to do a class and you have a situation like that, one way to work your class through it, so this isn't what everybody's concentrating on and nobody's really paying attention to anything else that you're saying that whole day, right? Let's deal with this right now and let's get through it, and then we have to get through the other material. So I think that would be one way to do it.
Well, thank you both so much. I want to be mindful of time. We are coming up on the hour. But thank you so much, Elisa, and thank you so much, Chris. I think this has been an excellent session. I really appreciate you both sharing your time with us and sharing some of your experiences. So I quickly, before we go, would just like to make an announcement. We'll be hosting these learning sessions every month going forward. And the recording of our first session, which was focused on the social science of ABLE, is now available on our YouTube channel. And we've also posted a link to that on our instructor portal. The next learning session is going to be on June 21st. And it's going to be focused on setting up for success. So this is how to promote and communicate about ABLE within your agency as you begin to roll out the program, how to facilitate group discussions, and how to encourage survey response participation, which is something I know that sometimes we struggle with. So we'll be sending around an email with a recording of this session and a registration link for the next session. So please keep an eye out for that in the next couple of weeks. But other than that, thank you so much for joining us. And again, special thank you to our fabulous panelists for a very informative session. And I will stick around for a few extra minutes in case anyone has any outstanding questions. But otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.